Today, we're discussing the topic of grief and our ability to experience it, work through it, and to find our passion for living once again. This can be a heavy subject at the best of times, and with our last few years of COVID, the wars, the droughts, the fires, people who have been experiencing devastation in their family, friends, or community, there is a burden that all of us are carrying. As always, our podcast is specifically set with the opportunity to find balance and flow for people as they listen to the podcast. If you're not sure you're ready for the topic today, know that we have your best interest in mind and have included ways to open flow and opportunities for transformation and acceptance to happen. My guest today is Dr. Marianne Bette. She's experienced personal loss and supports others with their own loss. She's an example of finding her way through the grief and learning how to live again. Her latest book is Living with a Grieving Heart, and it's an opportunity for her to support your journey as she identifies with and understands the needs of others. Here's what Dr. Bette offered with her experience. This is a quote from her press release. By addressing the subject of grief and loss, Bette offers sensitive support and a matter-of-fact view. Grief can make you crazy. It can shut you down, but grief can also crack you open and change you like nothing else. You can become your best self. If you let it, grief can be the transformation of your lifetime. Bette shares that there is no finish line with grief, but her book offers examples of how to cope and accept the reality that a life has ended. Chapters deal with hurtful things people say, the struggle of reliving, coulda, shoulda, woulda, and if only I had, the many decisions the caregiver must make, and the hopeful of moving on. We're going to look forward to a deep and direct discussion that helps support each of us on our journey to learning to live while we have loss and death as a part of our journey. You're listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, hosted by Dance Debut Inc. and the Cape Breton Tea Company. Please welcome author and family counselor, Dr. Marianne Bette. Hello.
Hello there. So nice to be here today.
And it's wonderful to have you here and to have this discussion and a topic that is not an easy one, but one that I know you're doing with eloquence and grace. And so I'm glad to be here to have this conversation.
Nobody's going to get out alive. We're all going to be dead.
None of us.
Right.
Exactly. Before we begin, as I promised in the introduction, I always like to set an intention for our listeners. And I'm pulling a card from my Affirmations for the Body and Biofield deck. This is a card deck that helps to bring ideas to different parts of the body or energy within the body or surrounding. And so I'm just going to hold up the card that I chose for today because it's bright and colorful. For those people that are on the podcast that are listening, it looks like two hearts. One heart's on the bottom of the card, the other heart's at the top of the card. And there's this lovely eminence of purple, pink, orange, blue in the center. And it's just kind of like a heartbeat coming out of those two hearts. The affirmation on the other side says, every step we take, every gesture we make is coordinating with our soul's purpose. Lean into love and light and trust your inner guide and wisdom. And this represents the 11th chakra, which is the energy that comes out of the hands and the feet. And those two are actually linked, which can be very powerful for people. Yeah. So the card deck is part of, you can find it in the shop at dancedebut.com, but it's a part of a series which provides ways for people to look differently at life, but also to realize how to use affirmations. So, yeah, so thank you for letting me bring that forward for people. And I know that you have a special mug there. What have you got today so that we can get this activation going?
This one that I chose right here is made by a family in La Paz, Mexico, where the granddaughter makes the clay and puts it in the kiln, and the grandmother is the one who does all this stuff by hand on here, and the mother is the one who runs the whole shebang, the whole store down there. It's really sweet. It's a 3-generational thing, and I'm a family doc, so that really kind of spoke to me.
And as you were holding that up, for those on the podcast, is bright colors, and it's flower kind of with a special. It's got little contrasting dots through it, and I know the dots often have significance because in there's 7 dots.
Yes.
So depending on what they're looking for with their symbols, that's a pretty powerful mug.
Yes. Lovely. Yes. You just feel like it's something special because it was handmade,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right down to the clay. So you're not just picking clay up, you're actually cultivating. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Beautiful. And inside your mug, what have you got today?
Well, right at this moment, I'm having water because, we had a little trouble getting the microphone to work, and I got in a little sweat about it. So I didn't want to drink hot tea, but I do drink breakfast tea every morning and different teas throughout the day.
Perfect. And water is lovely. I know for lots of people, they don't think about water as a way to transform emotion, but it's a great way for us to start with the podcast, that water has the opportunity to transfer us out of fear and anxiety and move us over into confidence and peace. And just sipping water can be that powerful. So it doesn't seem like you're doing much by putting a cup of water together, but you've got already the intention of the mug plus the power of the water, and the transformation can happen. So I'm going to share with you, I've got from the Cape Breton Tea Company from the Intention series. So this is Time Passages is what I have today, which is from the metal element, which is for lung and large intestine, which is for grief, guilt, and regret. And I thought that was kind of timely with the conversation we're going to have today. Perfect. And I've put it into my Friends United mug. And this is a place that hosts Indigenous art and supports the Indigenous endeavors on Cape Breton Island. And it's a beautiful place to visit. So I thought this might be also a nice way to bring in the idea of community and family and supporting everyone in need. So
excellent.
Yeah, so I'm going to offer you a cheers. In Cape Breton, we say slàinte. And thank you so much for joining in on the conversation.
Great. This image, other people are drinking their tea while they're looking at us.
I hope so. I hope so. So that they relax and enjoy and take advantage, and to know that as we go through this podcast and as we finish, we are creating balance and flow. So for anybody that is feeling anxiety or fear, we're able to transform. So let's dive in, Marianne. I'm so excited to be talking to you. And I know the podcast, I try to work around the transformation process that people go under. How do you go from being in that crisis situation and you deciding, I am going to change? That's it. I'm not going to stay where I am. I'm going to move forward. Do you want to talk about your story?
Yeah, I have, had some significant losses with my, when I was young, just in my early 30s. I just finished doing all my medical training, and, and it was in the 70s. So it was not easy, and they weren't very welcoming to women. And so there was a lot of struggles going through that. And I always wanted to be in family medicine. When I graduated from medical school, and then you do 3 years of what they call internship and residency, which is a training time, I got out, and I wasn't sure who really I was anymore, because it was, sometimes 80, 100 hours a week. And basically you're just sleeping and slogging through every week, So I said, I'm going to give myself a year of trying to figure out what I want to do, who I want to be now. And I worked 1 day a week for 24 hours in an emergency room in a small community hospital in the desert in California. And I was playing racquetball. I was hiking the high Sierras with the backpacks. I had taken flying lessons. I always wanted to be a pilot. And that's where I met my fiance, was in that hospital. And he was basically doing the same thing I was doing. He was the technician who ran the heart-lung machine when they did open heart surgery. And he also was a pilot, and he also was playing racquetball. So we really hit it off well. And I just felt like everything in my life had come to that wonderful point, and that's why all the hard things that I went through, like this was some kind of meant to be reward, so forth. And then we had a wonderful whirlwind relationship, and in January we flew back from California to Connecticut, and so he got to meet my whole family, where we announced our engagement and so forth. And then when we came back to California, and at that point we were living together, so he had a small plane. He was selling it for a bigger plane. And after he sold the plane, we were going to go pick up our wedding rings down in LA. And that's when he had a plane crash. We have no idea what happened. I'm sitting in the small airport lounge waiting for him to come back. And I didn't even feel that he died. So I had a real hard time understanding why I didn't even feel that he was gone, because we had such a tight connection. And so that threw me out the window for quite a while. And I had a lot of intense traumas and experiences from that, some of which I write in the book, because I think when there's an unprepared, that would be called an unprepared death, or a shocking or accidental death, it's more traumatic to your whole biochemistry and every other thing in your life than if it's a person who has a serious illness and dies. That's also what happens. But this was the worst. And there were times when I was really desperate, felt crazy, had out-of-body experiences. I mean, things that I was like embarrassed to tell people about because it sounded so crazy. But I decided to put it in the book because in my 40 years of family practice, I've talked to a lot of patients, and things happen to them that are in this same kind of a realm. And they would whisper to me and say, "Dr. Bette, I think I'm going crazy." And I would say, "Well, you probably are, because this is such a discordant thing that's happened to you. But I can tell you, you'll come back, because I've been there." And so, it was a way for me that experience really helped me to become a better doctor and a better person all the way around. And that, I'd say that took me about 3 years to get my feet really solidly under myself after that. I mean, from the outside, I looked like things were going along pretty well, but, that was my facade for getting through the day for other people. And so I stayed right where I was. There was a lot of decisions to be made, like, should I go to Alaska, which is one of the places I love and been many times since, but, should I run away? Should I stay? What do you do? Where do you go? How do you make yourself feel better? And there's no shortcuts. You just have to go through it, however best you can, with the least beating up. And thank God I had very good friends who saved me. And later on, at one point when I got consumed with rage, I went to a good therapist and I got that worked out. And so things were going along pretty smoothly. And then I met this man who, believe it or not, was a death and dying therapist. He wasn't my therapist, but he was a death and dying therapist. And we hit it off really well. Eventually got married. I had 2 children with him and a stepdaughter from his previous marriage. And then we were together probably 15 years or so. And then he got lung cancer. And over a year's time, he died. And boy, he had a phenomenal death. I mean, I could go on and on about, I mean, a prepared death is so different from a shocking accidental death. And so when I was retiring and COVID came, and I thought, so many patients have come to me and figured they could talk to me because most of them knew my husband. Because he helped to work in my practice back here in Connecticut, but they didn't know about my fiance. But I'm thinking to myself, I've had two of the most classic kind of death experiences, and I'm still a very happy and positive person. And people have often said to me, how can you be so happy with everything that's happened to you? And I said, well, I feel like they were gifts. I felt like they were life's gifts for my learning and my understanding about life. And so, after I worked through the hard parts of it and could step back, I thought I should really write down my ideas about this so that other people who are struggling can know that there's a kindred spirit out there, and maybe I have something to offer them, is why I wrote the book. And I'm not a writer. As you know, we had a little trouble with the connection in the beginning of this. and before that, but when my husband died, I could not even type or knew nothing about computers. They were all just coming about then in the 80s and or 90s. And I was like, can I even do this? But I was determined, and I still have, I'm probably an 8-finger typer now from 2, which I think is great. And so COVID came and we were all locked down. And so I said, well, I'm going to write stories. I'm not going to write a book. I'm going to write stories, short stories, because I have an Irish heritage and they're good storytellers. And I think after all 40 years of practicing in family practice, I think the best way to learn sometimes is to tell stories. So I decided to write this book about how you live with a broken heart and pick up your life and move forward. And so the stories, some of them are 2 pages. I think the biggest one is 6, and they kind of parallel the initial shock and weird things that happen and things that people say and shouldn't say and what you should, all of that. And then you get to the point where you're kind of living life and enjoying it again, and you look back. And anyway, I wrote the book. I thought, well, great, that's over. I don't have, I did my work. But now people are asking me to talk about it. And I've been all over the United States and in almost half the libraries in Connecticut, talking to groups of people about how to find joy after traumatic losses or any kind of big losses. And I'm absolutely stunned at how many people show up to hear these talks.
Yeah. Well, and it's not that people really talk about it. So when you go through the experience, then you're like, now, where do I go to find my resource? Because nobody's talked about it before that.
Exactly. Exactly. We had in our town, it's a big town compared to where you are. We have about 20,000 people. And the first talk I gave, they said, we'd like you to come on Tuesday at 2:00 and give a talk on this grieving in the local library. And I said, sure. And I said to I'm married again now, 5 years, who gets married at 70? I mean, this is another talk we need to have, girls.
Yes.
Anyway, I said, oh, sure, I'll come. And so I said to my husband, there'll probably be 10 people. it's 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Who's going to show up at that? So it was advertised in the local library, and so I showed up with my husband, and there were 50 people that came to that talk, and that just made such an impact on me that I thought, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing now. I'm supposed to be talking about this to people because I'm willing to make a fool of myself and show my vulnerabilities and say that I was crazy and the stupid things that I did and I was enraged. And I'm willing to put it out there because you know what? I don't care what people think anymore. That's the best thing about being older, and I'm retired now, so I don't have to uphold some kind of professional facade. So the heck with it. I'm just going to go out there and put all the skeletons out of the closet and say it like it is. And it just resonates with so many people. Yeah, it's amazing. Really amazing.
I love that part. When I turned 50, that's how I felt. I started to do it doesn't matter to me anymore. And exactly that facade. And it's so interesting that the parts that people want to talk about, the propriety that we try to keep within a professional stature, and the actual peace that people are looking for, the real lived peace. Is almost pulled away, but to be able to, for you to be able to find the voice of that is so beautiful.
I think menopause is one of the toughest times in a woman's life, but it's also where you get to that you don't give a damn part, or you just like get over yourself if people don't like it. And I think that's positive. I think that's a very positive feeling.
Well, and we live in Cape Breton Island. So for those people listening to the podcast, I'm on the east coast of Canada. And when we moved here from Alberta, we had been to 2 funerals in my lifetime. And at that point, I was in my early 40s. And we arrive here and funerals happen constantly here. And you're forever going to a wake or supporting a family member, or they have a telephone line where everybody makes the sandwiches and the sweets and gathers for the pieces. There's such a ritual around weddings, wakes, and funerals. We heard songs about it in the Celtic music and didn't realize how embedded it was into the culture of living here. And we had 1 week here where we attended 3 funerals in 3 days. It was crazy.
Holy moly.
And that can be normal for some of the people who've lived here their whole lives. We have only been here for just over a decade, so we don't have that same depth in the community that those people who were born here and stayed here. But it's an eye-opener to how much a part of life it is here, where in other parts of the country, it's so separate. And, unless you really knew the person, you might not go to the funeral thinking, well, I didn't know them that well, not thinking about how supportive it is to the family members and the friends who really did know the person and who lost that person, and the support that they're looking for. People aren't thinking about it the same way in the big city center where community is isolated. Here, everybody knows everybody. So there's always that relationship building piece that happens here in a conversation. So
isn't that amazing? And I think that's part of a smaller town, maybe a more remote thing. We used to have it in this town when it was smaller. My mom would say, oh, so-and-so, the husband died and I'm making a chicken. We're going to go over there and bring it over. And I mean, I grew up with that. So I thought that was normal, and then, even when there was a fire, like people would get in their car and drive over and see what they could do, throw with the shovel, throw dirt on a fire, and there was a fire once when I was in LA and I showed up and they said, get out of here, lady. And I was like, really? Don't people help here? So it's a different structure all around.
Definitely. As a counselor, you were known as the grief warrior.
Yes.
How did you get a title like that?
Well, that was a title actually that I made up because of the experiences that I'd had with grieving. And I think there are times when it takes a warrior attitude, that you are going to make it through, that you are not going to be taken down by this thing. And having been the one that went through a couple of heavy ones of these, I just felt like I could help other people. I mean, a warrior is someone who's fought battles and teaches others how to get through those battles, tricks of the trade, so to speak. And so I thought, I had a little discussion with my publisher because she was saying, "Well, I don't like that," and I said, "Well, I like it. I like it. I think it displays an attitude that is important in getting through difficult times in life." So that's how I came.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a good point too, because we do think of warrior as the battlefield, but not so much the emotional steward that carries us. And to be able to know that strength, even from using a title like that strength that's going to be able to pull us forward.
Right.
That
Right.
title carries a lot of weight.
Exactly. That was what I wanted it to grab people's attention, because, the title of the book, there's so many things about loss and grief and all of that, but I wanted it to say warrior on the cover. So I said, that's how I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Perfect. You also talk about the five senses and how they play a role in the grieving process. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, yes. People sometimes they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get ahead or get disconnected or reconnected, however it may be. And I think the five senses are so important, and I kind of connect those with nature. So I think nature is one of the magical things that is available to everyone to connect with. And the way to do it is through the senses. And maybe it doesn't have to be nature, but to me, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And you don't have to go to the Grand Canyon. You don't have to hike Kilimanjaro. You don't even have to leave your house. You could look out the window or you could watch, there's beautiful things on videos and so forth nowadays you could watch. You could even look at a picture book. But if you can connect with nature, then you got your five senses going, because you can hear things. You can hear the birds chirping. You could hear children playing. You can go and you can see flowers. You can touch tree trunks. You can walk on gravel or dirt or sand. All has different feelings, different sounds connected with it. And I think it's a way of slowing yourself down, drawing in and getting connected with the power that's in there, the magic of healing. And I think that's what I tell people to do, is if they're lost, they don't know what to do. That's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Sometimes just listening to just to be aware of the sounds of the birds coming at you and realizing, oh, there's something else out there besides me and my thoughts.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You want to realize that you are connected in some way. You're connected to everything that's out there. And you don't feel it when especially if you're looking backwards at what happened into your life, or if you're looking forwards now, what I don't have, or I can't do, or I don't have. It pulls you right into the here and now and connects you with the beauty that is there. And that's one of the big tricks in life. I wish they would teach it in high school or grammar school or in school, anywhere where you'd find out how important those things are.
And I think that was an interesting part of the pandemic, where when they were taking the kids outside to do their classroom work, and they were sitting in the grass, or they were going down to the forest and they were actually taking their time walking through the forest. That wasn't happening so much when the classroom really needed to be in the classroom.
Yes.
It was a lovely transformation.
Yeah, I think those, I hope when they, one of the good things about that pandemic in education is that they noticed so many things they didn't notice before. And I think that education, like medicine right now, is going through some tremendous changes that are well needed. And I hope there's more outdoor experiential hands-on learning for children, because that is the best way to learn, not pinned down in a desk in a class.
And I'm just thinking about the idea of transformation, which is all about what I hope to bring up with the podcast, and how you make that change. And I think we just illustrated that when we were forced into that pandemic, and we're forced into the situation where you have to quickly make change and you have to find the new way of doing it, how much opened up for us, how many new things we're capable of, and the viewpoints that we now have. We definitely changed. So it's, as much as change can be scary, and as much as working through the grief to finding the way to go forward can be scary and hard, like you said, what were the gifts that came out of that you can box up and you can say, those are mine and they're special, and because I have them, I have a viewpoint that other people don't have.
Now you know. Before, you thought you knew, or you thought you understood, but you didn't know it in your core. Now your core is imprinted with this indelible knowledge. It's wisdom. It really is wisdom, your own personal wisdom. And if people could just embrace that, it would be the transformation right there. It just takes you into all the things that are supposed to be important in your life.
Yeah. So let's think a little bit about moving forward. So you are now retired and you've got family. What kinds of things do you see progressing from the opportunity to write the book? And like you said, now you're out doing speaking engagements, which you hadn't thought of. What do you see moving forward for you with this?
It's it's like you say, things have to come in a balance. I am trying to balance right now my my commitment to helping others and my commitment to my personal self-growth. And so my personal self-growth has a lot to do with nature. I live across the river from one of the National Audubon Society sites. That's 800 acres, and I live in a beautiful place. And I'm a crazy mad gardener, and I'm out there all the time. Half the time I'm hurting myself, and I'm trying to realize what my limits are now that I'm older. I had to hire somebody to put the mulch on the garden because it was just too much for me, lugging all this mulch around and being exhausted. So it's a real balance, and it might have to go with the seasons. Like I might have to just stay with my garden in the summer, and like today I'm doing a podcast and with you, which I was very much looking forward to. And I have only one other thing until October, because I just wanted to be able to just connect with nature. And it's like, that's my church. That's my God connection, And so it's a balance. And now I have 3 daughters. I have my stepdaughter who lives out in California. And when here I am putting the finishing touches on my book, and she calls me up, and my oldest grandson, who was 28, had overdosed and died from fentanyl. And so I flew out there to be with her for 2 or 3 weeks and her family. So I'm more connected with them now. But I also have 2 daughters that live in North Carolina, and one's 28, one's 33. So they haven't really started their families yet. So I'm still free to be doing all that I want to do for myself and my speaking. And so, sometimes it's too much and sometimes it's not enough. So I'm still working with that balance, I think when it comes fall again and I'm starting to pull out of the garden, I have a few other books in mind I might want to get going.
Awesome. That's lovely.
Yeah. Kind of completely different. I have had experiences with some patients that are just phenomenal stories of their life and their experiences. And my husband says to me, you have to write those down. Those are inspirational. He says, we need inspiration now. Everybody's got all this tough stuff and tough politics and tough this and that. And I said, well, okay. So I'm starting, that's in the back of my mind. I've got a few of them half written in my head. So, but yeah. I think it would be fun for people to hear about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you do have 2 books. So we've talked about the second book. What's the title of your first book again?
The first book is called Living with a Dead Man. And it's a very, dramatic title because my husband, who was dying, said to me one day, you've got to stop looking at me like you're living with a dead man. He said, I'm going through this and I don't want to look at you and realize I'm dying every time I look at you. So I was like, oh, I have to adjust my attitude, even though in my doctor head, I knew he wasn't going to be able to beat this cancer because it was already had spread from his lung to his brain. He had a seizure in my daughter's 2nd grade parent-teacher conference. Talk about traumatic. My first husband was very traumatic in a lot of ways. But so that book, that's why we got to Living with the Grieving Heart, because my editor gal said, why don't you stick with the living with thing? And and that is a story about, it's about family, it's about community, it's about who shows up, who doesn't show up, the choices that you have. And him being a death and dying therapist, he did it really excellently. And so I wanted to write about that so people knew that if they're facing a life-threatening illness and going to possibly die, there are a lot of power that they have that they see it all going away. But no, now they have a new power. And so that's what that book is written about, the transformation at the end and having a good life.
Wow.
Good death, really.
Wow. So you've got a lot of wisdom that you're sharing, and it's not easy to write a book. I've done self-publishing, so I've not been with a publishing company, and it's a hard road. So hats off to you for number one, getting the writing done, but number 2, the follow through of the publicity and the marketing piece is a difficult road that we don't think about when we're writing. We're thinking that's going to be the hard part.
It was like, oh, I wrote the book. Okay, it's done. It's in a library somewhere. No. You got to do something.
It has more. Yeah.
Yes.
But you definitely have the opportunity then to bring people into the conversation in different places, which is also interesting. So not looking at grief through just one lens, but through the different perspectives, and then starting to really have conversations. If you are faced with someone who is in a terminal illness, how can you look at it? What are the skills that you can bring forward and support with?
And it's not all hard. I mean, there's even in the book that I wrote about my husband dying, there's some very funny parts. I mean, you don't lose your sense of you do lose your sense of humor, but it's not gone, and it comes out in funny ways, and it's just when you can step back and look at the whole picture, it's wonderful. It's amazing. I'm sorry that he died, and I think sometimes, what if he didn't? And then I'm like, okay, get out of here with that. That just doesn't fit, But you do have a lot of things that you go through in your life, and you're thinking, and sometimes it's like taking the weeds out in the garden. These days that doesn't belong here. That doesn't fit. It's not where I'm going. This isn't the look I'm trying to get. So I'm out there in that garden, boy. I'm figuring it all out.
Well, and the other thing about the garden too that's interesting, because here we have, June is dandelion month, and it's dandelion month. That's it. But other places in the country, they're trying to kill those dandelions because they make the grass look bad. And here, we just embrace that it's dandelion month and these beautiful yellow flowers come up. But then after that, there's another series of yellow flowers. So we have yellow flowers all season long, and the ditches always have a yellow flower in them. So it's what you're looking at. And then you think about the power of a dandelion and its essence about supporting life, and it's supporting resiliency. And that's the essence of it. When you start to look at the dandelion, not as it's taken over your garden and it's everywhere in your grass, but the resiliency that it brings to you at the start of the season, and then what that's going to cultivate for the rest of the season. It's a different way of looking at the weeds in the garden.
And the weeds, I often said I'd just like to be a pretty weed, because they're so strong, and you're not getting rid of them. They're going to be back every single year. They're back, and they can grow under the most incredible conditions, and sometimes just in a crack in a huge boulder, there's a weed. It's like, oh yeah, they've got their stories to teach. Yeah.
When we moved here, the first winter, under the snow were pansies, and they were blooming under the snow. I thought, where does that happen? And it was only that one winter. And it was fascinating, because it wasn't just one spot either, like near the house or something. It was like all over the yard. And so as the snow would melt and change and the wind would blow and take the snow off, these pansies would be blooming underneath. And then since that time, pansies have left the yard. Sometimes they come back. And so they just float in and out. But I've really started to look at what's in the garden and what is it trying to tell me, more so than what am I trying to cultivate. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's amazing. It's so much to learn. So many wonderful, beautiful, the lessons. And, I always tease my husband. I said, we live in the Garden of Eden. We just have to pay attention that it's right there.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I like to finish off the podcast with some kind of a movement. So we've flowed through the conversation. We set the intention. We activated with the tea. And then I know if anybody's been sitting listening to the podcast, we want them to be up and moving. Do you have a favorite thing that you like to do that gets you going?
Well, I was reading your thing about the movement and walking, and the way you did, sidestep and backwards and forwards. And I'm adopting that. I think that's just a fabulous thing. Myself, the first thing I do in the morning is I shuffle into the kitchen, make a cup of tea, and I go out and I just walk around the garden and I just look at what's happening. And so that's how I get myself going. It isn't a specific step or dance, but it is kind of a garden walk or garden dance every morning.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing like putting your feet especially your bare feet, if you can do
Yes.
it, into the
Yes.
grass and into the dew, and just feeling that the water that the night has produced. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. There you go. In
Yeah.
the dirt. You know, I mean, my whole life as a physician, everything had to be so clean and sterile. And I love getting my hands dirty. I love getting out there, get my knees dirty, my hands dirty. I like walking in the grass and the dirt. It's great. It's
Mm-hmm.
great.
Mm-hmm. So you were referring to, in my script that I prepare for the podcast, I had talked about, I always try to pick my activity of what I think I'm going to talk about for the day. And I had talked about you can walk forward, but a lot of times too, you need to walk sideways, backwards, sometimes backwards in a circle. Sometimes people actually feel more comfortable walking backwards than they do walking forwards. And forwards for them can be like walking through the mud every day. It's just like such a heavy thing. But when they walk backwards, they have a freeing experience. So just inviting people to try moving, not always forward on the path. You go for your walk and you're set in your, I'm going on my walk, but to just explore and just allow yourself to move different directions and see what it feels like. And it might be clumsy, and that's okay. Over time, it gets easier. As dancers, we would do what's called a grapevine, which would be step sideways, step behind, step sideways, step in front. And that little pattern was a tricky one to teach to kids if they didn't have both dimensions working, back and front dimension, as they were moving sideways. But it was a great exercise because once you got it, your body just started to move in different ways. And so I invite people then to think about when they're walking, or if you're walking a dog, taking the dog out, you usually go forward. Sometimes you're off on an adventure, depending where they want to take you, but you can also walk the dog. You can do the walking backwards, and it's a different way for you to see things at the same time. So I invite people to do that. And every time you take a step, you're taking a step forward. So if you are stuck and you're not sure how you want to proceed, every step you take is forward, whether that's sideways or backwards. Yeah.
I like that backwards in a circle. I'm going to try that today.
The other thing I invite people to do is to get the power of their foot in their footsteps. On my YouTube channel at Michelle Greenwell, in the playlist called It's in the Cards, there is the series put together for the feet and the foot sensors. So if you are having trouble stepping forward, this one will actually get you activating all the foot sensors, and it helps you with grounding, stability, centering, balance. So it's a great way to maybe move yourself forward, or just even give you the chance, if you sit at your desk, to do it under your desk and just get that propulsion of that idea of change and of moving. Yeah.
I just love it, because that's such a simple little opening right there. Just, you can be sitting right there and change everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I refer to that as dynamic sitting rather than static sitting, where we sit down and we think, especially if you're working in front of a computer, where you just hone in and you're focused on what you need to do. But actually sitting and being aware that you're sitting, and then moving in your seat while you're participating. So as we've been going through the podcast, my feet have changed positions. I've rolled through some different positions. My hands have been in different positions. I've tried to produce calming effects and figure eight patterns while you're talking. And people aren't going to see that on the podcast or know about it, but it's been underlying and hidden in what we've been doing, which is also a dynamic way of being able to bring energy and vitality to what we're doing. Yeah. Even if it's it.
Yeah. And subtlety, so when you slow down, you can enjoy the subtlety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So how can they find your book, and how can they find you?
I am on Amazon, and I think you have the connection to Emerald Lake Books, which is my publisher, and they can get the books through her as well. I have an Instagram account, I guess you'd call it, where it's Betty Marianne, and people can contact me through that. I'm not a big poster on Instagram. Sometimes I'll post 3 times a week, and then it'll be a week I won't post. And I just put things that are about nature. Sometimes it's dance or music, things that just underwater shark dances or seahorses or, any nature thing I'll put on there. And sometimes thoughtful quotes. So it's not any political stuff, and it's not any just what I consider disturbing, but just enjoyment, pictures of flowers, anything that I like, it shows up there. And so they can connect to me through that.
Perfect. And if they're looking, as you were saying, you can go to Amazon. It's Living with a Grieving Heart. And
Right.
if you want to go and check out emeraldlakebooks.com, that's
Right.
your publisher. And then you have your page there with a description and everything, so you can learn more about the book that way too.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh my goodness. This has been so much fun. I don't even want to end. We have a lot to talk about.
I know, we could keep going. It's always lovely. That's great. And like you
Yeah.
said, moving into your 70s and what you're doing, I think that's definitely an idea for another podcast.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have not talked about that yet in any of my conversations. So I think that's what we need to do. That's
Okay,
beautiful.
Donna. I'll be available. Just let me know.
Awesome. All right. As we come to a close, season 3 is devoted to the transformational process that happens when people reach into their authentic selves to create magic. And our season has several different kinds of publications across the month. And we hope that they'll inspire and empower you to consider living your true heart's desire with love and compassion for others at the forefront. Thank you for joining us. Marianne, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
And this is Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, wishing you well-being. Take care.